The last thing my mother said before I walked out that door with my kids and every bag we owned was, "You are overreacting." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "No, I am just finally done." And I left. Patricia stood in the hallway with her hand over her mouth. My father Donald did not move from his chair. My brother Sylvan called after me, but I did not turn around. I had 2 kids, 3 bags, and a lease I had signed 6 weeks earlier that nobody in that house knew about. Before I tell you the rest, I want to know where you are watching this from. Drop your city or your state in the comments right now. And if this story sounds like something you have lived through or something you are living through right now, please hit that like button and subscribe. Every single one of those clicks tells me you want more stories like this one, and I have plenty more to tell. Now let me take you back to where this actually started, because the ending only makes sense when you understand everything that came before it. My name is Nora. I was 35 years old, a registered nurse working 12-hour shifts at a hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was 8 months out of a marriage that had quietly fallen apart over the course of 8 years. My ex-husband Marcus was not a bad man in the way people imagine when they hear the word divorce. He was just someone who never fully showed up. He was present in the house but absent in every way that mattered. When our twins Lily and Owen were 9 years old, he sat me down at the kitchen table and told me he needed to find himself. Those were his exact words. He needed to find himself. And just like that, I was alone with 2 kids, a mortgage I could not afford on one income, and a stack of bills that kept arriving even after he stopped being there to help pay them. I made the decision to let the house go. It was practical, not emotional. I ran the numbers 3 times and the numbers said the same thing every time. I could not sustain it alone. My savings were not where they needed to be, and I had no immediate backup plan for housing. That was when my mother called. Patricia had a way of making offers sound like pure generosity, and at the time I believed that is exactly what it was. She said, "Nora, come home, bring the Barbies, the house is too big for just me and your father anyway. You can save your money, get back on your feet, and the kids will have their grandparents right there." My father got on the phone after her and said, "We mean it, sweetheart, come home." So I did. We moved into my parents' house in late September. The house was a single-story ranch-style home on a quiet street on the east side of Albuquerque, with 3 bedrooms, a separate room that had been used as a home office but had been cleared out for Lily and Owen to use as a play space, and a backyard with a patchy lawn that Owen immediately decided was perfect for running. Lily and Owen shared one of the guest bedrooms, which was large enough for 2 twin beds and a small dresser each. It was not their own house, but it was stable, and at 10 years old, stability was what they needed most. The first few months were genuinely good. Patricia cooked dinner on Thursday evenings and always made enough for everyone. Donald taught Owen how to play chess after dinner, sitting at the small table in the living room with a wooden board that had belonged to Donald's own father. Owen took to it immediately and started borrowing chess books from the school library. Lily started weekly piano lessons every Saturday at a music center about 15 minutes from the house. She had been asking for lessons for 2 years, and I had never been able to fit them into the budget during the marriage. Signing her up felt like giving her something back that the divorce had delayed. I worked 3 night shifts a week at the hospital, and on those nights Patricia stayed with the kids. She never complained about it. She seemed to enjoy it, actually. She would have snacks ready and let them stay up a little later than usual. When I came home in the mornings, the kids would tell me what they had watched with their grandmother or what game they had played. It was working. I opened a dedicated savings account with a separate bank from my regular checking account. I set up an automatic transfer of $400 every 2 weeks. My goal was 18 months. After 18 months, I wanted enough saved for a security deposit and first and last month's rent on a place of my own. I did not talk about this plan out loud. I just worked it quietly. My closest colleague at the hospital was a nurse named Renata. We had worked the same unit for 6 years and she knew me well enough to read my face without me saying a word. One evening during a slow stretch on our shift, I told her about the arrangement with my parents. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished she said, "Your mom sounds great right now, but watch what happens when something she wants more comes along." I laughed it off. I told her she was being cynical. She gave me a look and went back to charting. I thought about that comment sometimes in the evenings, sitting at the kitchen table after the kids were in bed, checking my savings balance on my phone before I turned off the light. Things were steady. Patricia and Donald were consistent. The kids were happy. I told myself Renata was wrong. I kept checking the balance anyway. It was the Christmas dinner in December when everything began to shift, though I did not recognize the shift for what it was until much later. Sylvan and his wife Katie drove over that evening. Sylvan was 31, my only sibling, and he had always been the one my parents quietly orbited. Not in an obvious way, not in a way you could point to at a single moment and say, "There, that is it." It was more like a current running underneath everything, a steady tilt in his direction that I had grown up adjusting to without ever naming it. Katie was 29, worked in marketing, and had the kind of easy confidence that made her comfortable in any room. They had been married for 2 years. Halfway through dinner, Sylvan set down his fork and said they had an announcement. Katie was pregnant, 14 weeks. My mother pushed back her chair and walked around the table to hug them both before Sylvan had finished the sentence. My father stood up and shook Sylvan's hand and then hugged him. There were tears on Patricia's face. It was the first grandchild from Sylvan's side, and the reaction made that clear in every possible way. I clapped, I said congratulations, and I meant it. I was genuinely happy for them. Lily leaned over and whispered to me, "Where is the baby going to live?" I told her that Sylvan and Katie had their own house and the baby would live there. She nodded and went back to her food. Nobody at the table had heard her ask. The following morning, things were different in a way that was hard to articulate but easy to feel. Patricia was on the phone with Katie by 8 in the morning. By the time I came into the kitchen for coffee, she was deep in a conversation about nursery colours and whether Katie was experiencing morning sickness and what prenatal vitamins she was taking. That conversation lasted 45 minutes. I made coffee, got the kids started with breakfast, and Patricia never looked up. Over the next several weeks, dinner conversation shifted entirely. The names being considered for the baby, the plan for Katie's maternity leave, whether Sylvan and Katie's house had a good school district, whether the guest room at my parents' house could be used for baby items that would not fit in Sylvan's house. These topics replaced every other topic so completely that it happened without anyone seeming to notice. Except Lily and Owen noticed. One evening Owen came to the table and started telling everyone about a math competition at school. He had placed second in his grade on a timed problem-solving test, and his teacher had given him a certificate. He held it up. Patricia said, "That is wonderful, baby," in the same tone she might use to acknowledge someone passing the salt, and then turned to Sylvan and asked whether he had called the contractor about expanding the closet in the baby's future room. Donald nodded along with Patricia. Owen lowered the certificate. He set it face down on the table and finished his dinner without saying another word. I saw it. I folded that moment up and put it somewhere in my chest where I kept the things I was not ready to deal with yet. Patricia began asking me to adjust my work schedule to help with Katie's prenatal appointments. The first time she asked, it seemed reasonable. Katie's regular doctor was across town, and the appointment was on a Tuesday afternoon when Sylvan had a work commitment. He said he could not move. I switched a shift. Fine. The second time. I asked Patricia why Katie's own mother could not take her, and Patricia said Katie's mother lived in Arizona and it was a lot to ask. I switched that shift too. When the third request came, I said I needed more notice, and Patricia looked at me with a particular expression I knew well from childhood, the one that said I was being difficult, and said, "It is not a big deal, Nora. You are a nurse, you understand medical appointments." I switched the shift and did not bring it up again. Nobody said thank you, not Patricia, not Sylvan, not Katie. One afternoon Patricia walked into the playroom while Lily was in the middle of building something with the craft supplies we kept on the shelf in there, and said casually, as if commenting on the weather, "I have been thinking this room might work better as a space for the baby when they visit. It has the best light in the house." Lily looked up and said, "But this is our playroom, Grandma." Patricia said, "I know, sweetheart, I have not decided anything yet." Then she walked out. I found Lily in the kitchen 10 minutes later, sitting very still at the table. Not crying, just sitting. I asked her what was wrong and she said, "I do not think Grandma knows we live here." That sentence stayed with me for a long time. I called Renata that night after the kids were in bed. I told her what was happening. I went through the schedule changes, the dinner conversations, Lily's face when Patricia walked out of the playroom. Renata listened. When I was done, she said, "Nora, start moving faster on that savings account." I told her I already had. She said, "Move faster." The last night of that year, New Year's Eve, Patricia rearranged the living room seating before the family gathered. She moved Lily's favourite reading chair, the one Lily always curled up in to read before bed when we were in the common spaces, out of the living room entirely and into the hallway. She replaced it with an upholstered rocking chair she had ordered specifically for Katie to sit in comfortably during the later months of the pregnancy. It was a practical decision, and Patricia would have had a practical explanation ready if anyone had asked. Lily stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at the space where her chair used to be. She did not say anything, she just stood there and looked. I saw her, I did not say anything either, but I logged into my savings account from my phone in the bathroom that night and increased my automatic transfer to $600 per pay period. The pipe burst in late March. Sylvan called on a Sunday morning to say that a water line in their house had failed overnight, and the damage was significant. The floors in the main hallway and the primary bedroom were soaked through. The insurance company had been contacted, but the timeline for repairs was unclear, and the contractor Sylvan spoke to said it could take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks depending on parts and scheduling. Patricia said yes before Sylvan finished explaining. I found out by text message an hour later. The message read, "Sylvan and Katie and the baby are moving in for a bit while their house gets fixed, going to put them in the living room area just temporary." Thorn was 6 months old by then. I read the message twice, then I typed back, "How long is a bit?" Patricia replied. 6 to 8 weeks, the contractor said. I put my phone face down on the counter and stood there for a moment. Then I picked it back up and sent a message to Renata that said only, "It is happening." Within 3 days, the living room had been converted into a bedroom for Sylvan and Katie. A portable crib was set up in the corner. A sound machine was placed on the windowsill. Extra blankets and a diaper changing station appeared on the low shelf that had previously held my parents' books. The house now had 5 adults and 3 children in it, plus an infant, and the square footage had not changed. 2 weeks after Sylvan and Katie moved in, Patricia asked to speak with me privately in the kitchen. She had a tone that I recognized as her explaining something that had already been decided. She said that she had been thinking about Thorn's sleep situation. The living room arrangement was not ideal because there was too much foot traffic. She thought the playroom, which Lily and Owen used after school and on weekends, had better light and was in a quieter part of the house. She wanted to convert it into Thorn's room. I asked where Lily and Owen would play. Patricia said they were 10 years old and did not need a dedicated play space the way a baby needed a proper room. She said they could use their bedroom or the backyard. I asked if she had spoken to the kids about it. She said she did not think that was necessary. The playroom became Thorn's room within the week. Lily's Saturday piano lesson that same week was the first casualty. Patricia had committed the car to helping move Sylvan's additional items from their house, and the lesson fell on the same day. I was working. There was no second car available. The lesson was cancelled. I rescheduled for the following week, but the week after that there was another conflict, and after the third cancellation, Patricia sat me down and said it might make sense to pause the lessons temporarily because the household schedule was too complicated right now. She said it like it was a shared inconvenience, something we were all managing together, as if Lily's lessons were a luxury that the situation required us to sacrifice equally. Lily was the one who lost something, nobody else lost anything. The noise rule appeared on the refrigerator on a Tuesday. Patricia had printed it on a piece of paper and taped it up with 2 strips of masking tape. It said that Thorn's sleep schedule ran from 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning, that the household needed to be quiet by 6:30 p.m., that there should be no running inside, no loud music, and voices should be kept at a moderate level at all times. At the bottom it said this was temporary, and everyone's cooperation was appreciated. Owen read it standing at the refrigerator with a bowl of cereal. He read it without expression and then sat down at the table and ate his cereal without saying anything. That Friday evening, the 4 of us, me, Patricia, Donald and Sylvan, were in the kitchen after dinner. Owen was in the living room playing a board game with Lily. He laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes from the belly, the kind that means something genuinely funny just happened. It echoed down the hall. Within 30 seconds, Katie appeared in the kitchen doorway and said directly to me, "Can you please control your son? Thorn just went down." I looked at Katie, I looked at Patricia, I looked at Donald. Patricia looked at the sink, Donald looked at the table, nobody said a word. I walked into the living room and told Owen quietly that we needed to keep the volume down. Owen looked at me and said, in a voice so careful it did not sound like him at all, "Did I do something wrong?" I told him no. He nodded and picked up his game piece and did not laugh again for the rest of the evening. 6 weeks came and went. Sylvan mentioned once when I asked directly that the contractor had found additional damage behind the walls and the timeline had extended. I asked Patricia when she thought Sylvan and Katie would be able to go home. She looked at me with that expression again, the one from childhood, and said, "Nora, why are you like this? They have a baby, they need support." I did not respond. 8 weeks passed, then 10, then 12. I did not argue. I did not push harder. I made one phone call from the hospital parking lot after a night shift, standing beside my car in the 6 a.m. cold, and I put down a security deposit on a duplex in Rio Rancho. 2 bedrooms, a small yard, close enough to the kids' school that I could manage the drive without adding too much to my morning. The landlord's name was Gerald. He was straightforward and the unit was available in 30 days. I wrote him a check and did not tell anyone in my parents' house what I had done. Renata was the only person who knew. I called her from that same parking lot and told her. She said, "Good, now you just need the moment to leave." I did not know the moment was coming in less than 2 weeks. One evening after the kids were in bed, Owen asked me a question from his pillow in the dark. He said, "Mom, are we invisible to them?" I sat on the edge of his bed and did not answer right away. I reached over and put my hand on his shoulder and I told him that he was not invisible to me, that I saw him every single day, that I always would. He nodded and closed his eyes. I sat there until I heard his breathing slow down. Then I went into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and stood there for a few minutes with the water running. It was a Wednesday. I left for the hospital at 5:50 a.m. for a 12-hour shift. Before I walked out, both kids were at the kitchen table eating cereal. Patricia was making coffee. Everything was ordinary. My shift was busy from the start. We had 3 post-surgical admissions before 9 in the morning, and the floor was short-staffed. I did not look at my personal phone until my first break, which was closer to 11:30 than 11. There was a text from Lily. It said, "Mom, Grandma is moving our stuff." I read it and assumed she meant Patricia was straightening up, maybe reorganizing the bedroom. I typed back, "Okay, sweetie, no worries," and went back to work. At 12:30, another message from Lily. "Mom, she put our boxes in the basement. Our beds are still up here, but she said they are moving those 2 after school." I stopped walking. I was in the middle of the hallway near the supply room. I stood there and read the message 2 more times. At 1:15, another message. "Mom, I do not want to sleep in the basement. It smells weird down there and there is no window in my room." At 1:45, my phone rang. It was Owen. He was crying, not dramatically, not hysterically. The quiet kind of crying that means a child has been trying to hold it together and finally cannot. He told me that his grandmother had said Thorn needed their room because it was larger and had better natural light, and that the basement had been set up for them and it was fine. He said, "But Mom, it is not fine." I called Patricia immediately. She answered on the 3rd ring in a completely even voice, as if she had been expecting the call and had already decided how it would go. She told me she had only moved their boxes for now, that the beds would follow later, and that the basement was perfectly usable. It had lighting and the small window air conditioning unit. I asked her why she had not called me before doing any of this. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This is my house, Nora. I have the right to arrange it." I told her I would be home as soon as I could manage it. I went to find my charge nurse. Her name was Diane and she had been in the unit for 15 years. I told her I had a family emergency and needed to leave. I gave her the overview of my patient load, nothing critical, and told her I would make arrangements immediately. Renata happened to be on shift that day and told Diane she would absorb the coverage. Diane said go. I changed out of my scrubs in under 4 minutes and was in my car before 2 p.m. The drive home took 22 minutes. I did not call anyone. I thought about what I was going to say and then I stopped thinking about it and just drove. I walked in through the front door. Patricia was in the kitchen. Donald was in the living room with the newspaper. Sylvan was on the couch holding Thorn. Katie was not visible. I did not say anything to any of them. I walked directly to the basement door and went down. The basement was unfinished in the way that basements in older ranch houses often are. Concrete floor, low ceiling, exposed pipes along one wall. There was a single bulb fixture in the center. The air conditioning unit Patricia mentioned was a small portable unit in the corner that pushed out cool air but did nothing about the smell, which was the particular smell of a space that does not get enough air circulation. There was no natural light. The one narrow rectangular window near the ceiling was painted over. In the far corner, Patricia had arranged what she intended as a bedroom. 2 sets of boxes from Lily and Owen's room were stacked against the wall. Lily's stuffed bear was on the floor beside one of the boxes. It was not in a bin. It was not set aside carefully. It was just on the floor. I stood in that corner for a long time. 10 minutes, maybe more. I was not deciding anything. The decision was already made. I was just giving myself the time to feel the full weight of it before I went upstairs and said what needed to be said. I went back up. Patricia was still in the kitchen. I walked in and said, "We are leaving today." She set down the dish she was holding and said, "You are overreacting." Donald looked up from the living room. He said, "Nora, let us talk about this." Sylvan looked over from the couch and said, "It is just temporary, come on." I looked at my mother. I said, "You moved my children's beds into a basement while I was at work. You did not call me. You did not ask. You made a decision about where my children would sleep without telling me. There is nothing temporary about what I think of that." Then I went to get the kids. I called Lily and Owen's school from the hallway and told them I was picking up early due to a family matter. By the time I got to the school, which was 12 minutes from the house, both kids were waiting at the front office. Lily had her backpack. Owen had his chest set tucked under his arm. I drove them back to the house and told them we were going to our new home. Lily said, "We have a new home." I said yes, we had had it for a little while. I had just been waiting for the right time. Owen said, "Today is the right time." I said yes. We went inside and I told them to pack what they needed most. 1 bag each, the rest I would come back for. Owen packed his chess books, his game pieces, and 3 changes of clothes. Lily packed her sheet music, her stuffed bear, which she had gone down to the basement to retrieve herself, and her favorite hoodie. I packed 3 large bags. We walked through the living room. On the way out, Patricia was standing near the hallway. She said, "Nora, where are you taking them right now?" I said, "To our home." She said, "This is your home." I did not stop walking. I did not raise my voice. I opened the front door and held it for my kids, and we walked out. That was the last conversation I had with my mother for 11 days. We pulled into the driveway of the duplex in Rio Ranch at 4 in the afternoon. Renata had been there earlier that day. She had a key I had given her the week before when I signed the final paperwork. She had left a bag of groceries on the kitchen counter and a handwritten note taped to the front door. It said, "Welcome home, Nora." Lily and Owen walked through the front door and immediately went from room to room. Each bedroom had a window. The rooms were not large, but they were clean and quiet, and they belonged to us. Owen walked into his room, set down his chest set on the floor and said, "Mom, this smells clean." Lily stood in her room and turned around slowly, looking at the walls. Then she said, "Can I put my sheet music on the dresser?" I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and cried. Not loudly, just steadily, the way something releases when the pressure that was holding it in place finally lifts. The kids came in and sat down next to me, one on each side, and we sat there on the kitchen floor for a while without saying much. Then Owen said he was hungry, and I got up and made sandwiches. That first night both kids slept through until morning. No noise rules, no schedule posted on the refrigerator, no footsteps in the hall that required holding their breath. 3 weeks after we moved in, I re-enrolled Lily in piano lessons at a studio 4 miles from the duplex. Her new teacher was a woman named Frances who taught out of her home studio and had 2 decades of experience. Lily came home from the first lesson talking about a piece she wanted to learn for the spring recital. She had not talked about piano like that in months. Owen joined the chess club at his school 2 weeks after we settled in. He had been interested before, but the evenings had been too constrained at my parents' house for him to stay after school comfortably. Now he stayed late on Tuesdays and Thursdays and came home with annotated game sheets he spread out on the kitchen table to study. 4 months after we moved out, I was called into a meeting with the nursing director and the unit manager at the hospital. I had been recommended for the charge nurse position on my floor. The role came with a modest pay increase, a change in scheduling structure, and more responsibility for coordinating floor operations. I accepted. I called Donald that evening to tell him. He said, "That is great, honey," in a tone that was warm but brief, and then the conversation moved on. He did not ask about Lily or Owen. I noted that and did not call again for a while. Renata took me out for dinner the following Friday to celebrate. She ordered dessert and made a speech that was mostly jokes and ended with something genuine. She said, "I have watched you carry things for a long time. It is good to see you put some of them down." I did not respond to that with anything eloquent. I just nodded and ate my dessert. While our days were settling into a rhythm that felt sustainable for the first time in years, the situation at my parents' house was deteriorating in ways I only learned about gradually. Sylvan and Katie had still not returned to their house when we left. By the time their repairs were actually completed, Katie had grown accustomed to having Patricia handle Thorn during difficult nights, and Sylvan had stopped talking about their own place as home. They stayed through the summer. The arrangement that had been temporary for Lily and Owen had become a permanent fixture for Sylvan and Katie without anyone questioning it. In August, Katie told Sylvan she wanted to separate. I heard this from Donald, who called me on a Sunday evening and said it in a careful, measured way, as if reading from notes. He said Katie had decided the marriage was not working and that she was returning to her family in Texas and taking Thorn with her. Sylvan was devastated. He stayed at my parents' house and began looking for work, though the job he had was already inconsistent. Patricia had built her days around having an infant in the house and a daughter-in-law to help. When Katie left, she lost both. Donald later told me in a separate call that Patricia had been struggling, that the house felt empty, that Sylvan needed a lot of support and was not easy to be around, that things were harder than they had anticipated. I listened to all of this. I did not say, "I told you so," though the words were available to me. I asked how they were managing. I asked if they needed anything specific. I stayed on the phone as long as they needed. But I did not offer to come back. That door was not open, and I was not going to pretend otherwise. Patricia began sending text messages every few weeks. They were careful messages, softer in tone than she had been in months, asking about the kids, mentioning something Lily might like, commenting on something Owen had told Donald during a phone call. I responded to all of them, politely and briefly. I was not punishing her. I was just operating at the distance that felt honest. 11 months after we moved out, I sat across from a loan officer at a credit union in Albuquerque and reviewed the terms of a mortgage for a house in the Four Hills neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a proper fence, a room with enough wall space for Lily to eventually fit an upright piano, a corner in Owen's room that he had already mentally designated for a dedicated chess study area after I showed him photos online. I signed the paperwork on a Thursday morning. I texted Renata a single word, "Done." She replied with the words, "I knew it." 3 months after I signed the mortgage, Donald called and asked if I would come to a family dinner on a Sunday. He said he wanted everyone together. He said it calmly, without drama, but I knew my father well enough to understand that a requested gathering was never purely social. I told him I would come. I arranged for our neighbor Dolores, a retired school teacher who had become genuinely fond of Lily and Owen, to stay with the kids for the afternoon. I drove to my parents' house alone. When I arrived, Sylvan was already there, sitting quietly at the dining table. Katie was not present. Thorn was not present. It was the 3 of them and me. Patricia had cooked a full meal, which told me she was anxious and expressing it through effort. Donald poured water for everyone and sat down and said, "I think we need to talk about what happened and where we are as a family." Patricia spoke first. She said that she knew she had not handled things well. She said the arrival of Thorn had made her lose sight of what Lily and Owen needed. She said she was sorry for the basement, that she had not thought through what it would feel like from the outside. She said all of this in a measured, prepared way that told me she had rehearsed it, but she said it. Then she said, "I am hoping you will consider spending more time here, bringing the kids over more, being part of the family the way you used to be." I put down my fork. I looked at my mother, then my father, then at my hands on the table. I took a moment, not for drama, just to be sure I said what I actually meant. I said, "Mom, I appreciate that you said that, and I believe you mean it. But I need to be honest with you about what happened, because I do not think we can move forward without saying it plainly. You moved my children's belongings into an unfinished basement while I was working a 12-hour shift. You did not call me first. You did not ask me. You decided where my children would sleep without involving me at all. When I called you, you told me it was your house and you had the right to arrange it. That is true. It is your house. But it was also the place where my children were sleeping and living under the assumption that they were welcome and safe. That assumption turned out to be conditional." Patricia started to respond. I continued. "I have been doing a lot of thinking about the patterns that led to that moment, and they did not start with the basement. They started with the playroom. They started with the schedule changes for Katie's appointments. They started with Owen's certificate sitting face down on the dinner table because no one made space for him to finish his sentence. Those were small things individually. Together, they told my kids something I was not willing to let stand. Donald was looking at his plate, Sylvan was still, Patricia's eyes were wet. I said, I am not here to cut you off or to punish you. I love you both. I am glad Lily and Owen have grandparents who love them. But I need you to understand clearly. I will not put my children back into a situation where their place in this family is treated as secondary to whatever else is happening. I will not do that to them. I will not do that to myself. Donald said quietly, We hear you, Nora. I said, I know you do, Dad. I hope you mean that. I stayed for another hour. We ate dinner. Patricia asked about Owen's chess progress and Lily's piano recital. The conversation was careful, but it was real. When I left, I hugged both of my parents at the door. It was not a reconciliation in the way movies would frame it, some moment of full restoration where everything is resolved and forgiven in a single afternoon. It was something smaller and more honest, an acknowledgement that we could be in each other's lives, but that the terms had changed. Patricia now calls on the first Sunday of every month. She always asks if it is a good time before she starts talking. Donald comes to Lily's recitals and Owen's chess tournaments when I send him the details. Sylvan is working a steady job now, a project coordinator position he started earlier this year. He and I do not talk often, but when we do, there is less of the old static between us. Lily is in middle school. She performed in her spring recital 4 months ago and played a piece she had been working on for 3 months. Frances told me afterward that Lily has genuine ear and that she should keep going. Lily already knew she was going to keep going. She did not need anyone to tell her. Owen placed second in a citywide chess tournament in March. He came home with a small trophy and put it on his desk next to his chessboard. He studied his tournament games for the next 2 evenings, annotating where he made mistakes. He was not upset about second place. He was focused on what came next. I am 36 years old. I own my home. I sleep 8 hours when I am not working. My children laugh as loud as they want. I used to believe that asking for less made you easier to love. I spent years adjusting myself to fit into whatever space was left after everyone else had taken theirs. I adjusted my schedule, my expectations, my willingness to speak up. I told myself it was practical. I told myself it was temporary. And I kept reducing the size of myself and my children until one day I walked into a basement and found my daughter's stuffed bear on a concrete floor. That was the last adjustment I ever made. If you have ever been in a situation where you kept making yourself smaller to keep the peace, I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments. At what point did you decide enough was enough? Was there a single moment, a conversation, or did it build until one day you just knew? Leave your answer below. I read every comment and I would love to know your story. If this story reached something in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you do not miss the next story. Every story I tell is about real people navigating real situations, and there are many more to come. Like this video if you believe that knowing your own worth is not the same as being selfish. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. I hope you carry something useful from it. Take care of yourselves, and take care of the people in your life who are counting on you to see them. My name is Nora, and I am exactly where I am supposed to be.